Pleasure to welcome back three-time Stanley Cup winner, longtime NHL defenseman, Aaron Ward. How are you?
I'm good. It's Friday.
Yes, sir. Friday afternoon. And what do you think the topic of discussion is in this city? Take a guess, a wild guess.
Are the Expos coming back?
Yeah, I think they are. I don't think we've spent enough time on that, actually.
Mr. Pacioretty?
Yeah, sure is. Big week for Knuckles coming back. He had Serge Savard on earlier in the week, as you know, and earlier today it was Max. And we're going to replay that conversation a little bit later, not quite in its entirety, but very thoughtful as always. And one of the questions Knuckles threw at Max was, if the Canadians reverse their, kind of reverse course and decide to present an offer, but that offer would include giving up the captaincy?
I'm not sure. I mean, yeah. I'm really not. I think whatever's best for the team. If I'm here in terms of their plans, I don't see a case for that right now in my mind. That's not to say that it wouldn't change down the road. But in my mind right now, I don't see how, that would be brought up with other than to, make a reason for why last year happened. Last year happened for a lot of reasons. I'm a big part of that, but so are a lot of other people. And I take responsibility for my part, but I'm not willing to take the entire responsibility. And I think as we discuss, your question, that would kind of be pointing at, the finger at me taking the entire responsibility for the year. But that being said, moving forward, if I'm a part of this franchise down the road, I want what's best for myself and the team and the organization.
So I believe you're hearing that for the first time.
Yeah, I am.
What is your reaction?
I think that's a great answer. I think owning it, you can never go wrong with owning your role, whatever you perceive it to be. People may disagree how much of a role you had. I think that I think it's a solid answer, but I do like the fact that he's also throwing the onus back in the team. It's not just the rest of his teammates that came up short. He's talking about the fact that there's a responsibility from the management group and from the team overall to put out the best group you can. And there's areas of criticism. What did you do with Markov? I mean, you can go down every decision they made and be critical on some level. And I think last year, you showed up with a 6-shooter and you had 4 bullets in the chamber. And I think that's what he's saying is, he didn't play well. I'm not sure. I'm not clear if he's saying that he thought that being the captain of Montreal played a role in some of his lack of production last year. But I will say that I thought it was a well thought out answer. And if you read into it, he's saying like, hey, listen, I'll do what's best for the team. But clearly, in my opinion, that's not what's best for the team. And he's got an established role in Montreal. He understands the parameters of being the captain and the responsibilities that goes with it, the pressure that goes with it. So I think it's a pretty dumb kind of move on the part of the organization to pull it from him unless you're planning on trading him. And at that point, trade him, then pull it, because clearly he's not going to be captain.
Were you ever part of a team dynamic at the NHL level where there was the people running the team, management, maybe the coaching staff, felt whoever had the C on or whoever were members of a leadership core were misplaced?
You're saying from my perspective or from the team's perspective?
Well, from the team that you were a part of, did that ever happen? Did that kind of dynamic ever play itself out while you were part of the team?
I say, well, Eisenman was clearly the captain and justifiably so. Ronnie Francis was the captain, justifiably so. Roddy Brind'Amour. The only one that I personally struggled with was Jaromir Jagr, and that case, it's not a lack of leadership, and I'm not coming on to rip a guy. I just felt in the face of adversity, it almost like where we needed a little more kind of even-handed addressing of things that are going on the ice and off the ice. it almost as if he kind of internalized it in the moment. And we really sucked that year in New York. Like we're expected to be a really good team. Shanny was there. The year I went with Matt Cullen, so a lot of talent. I'm not including myself in that talent pool, but I said we had a lot of talent that year, and we came up short. And when the criticism started to really kind of echo both inside and outside the locker room, I felt as though it didn't always manifest itself from the captaincy to the void.
All right, I don't want to put words in Mitch Gallo's mouth, but we had the discussion earlier about the importance of captaincy leaders on the team, and I'm going to let him take over in a second here. But we're talking Aaron Ward, spent a long time in the NHL. Our observations are as observers. His feelings and observations, I think, would carry more weight as someone who's part of that team dynamic inside a room, traveling, etc. But go ahead.
Right. I just think that the actual letter, I never said that leadership was overrated, just the actual letter of having the C on your jersey didn't really translate to what happens on the ice. The C on the jersey is a made-up concept. I mean, for instance, there's 9 or 10 teams right now that don't even have a captain. Are they going to flutter out of the gates because nobody's wearing that important C? I think it's overstated at times, its importance. That's all.
I disagree, and I would tell you that oftentimes teams that don't have a captain is they clearly don't have a defined leader, right? So, I mean, you look at Carolina last year, and that may be a bad example because I think it was a dog and pony show here last year between the coach who almost tried to implode the team in his own way. Like there's a leader, and if you ask players in the locker room, they have a clear and concise idea. Normally, I'd say 90%, 95% of the time as to who that guy is. And so if you go to Carolina, who didn't have a captain last year, if you ask the guy man for man, it would have been Justin Williams. If you go to other teams, I guarantee you there's a guy with a level of character, a level of maturity, a level of professionalism, and possesses all those intangibles that for some teams, they have to be a certain group of things. Maybe he's straight-laced, very focused because he's in a big market, and there's a lot of distractions, and that's one of those things that almost keeps guys accountable in the locker room. Or he's a guy that understands the market and keeps things loose because maybe like Montreal or Toronto, I mean, you're always under the scope, and you feel as though you can't get a breath, and he's a guy that he deflates the tension in that locker room. I don't believe that C is just a letter. I think C is a leadership quality that every team requires. Mm-hmm. And I think most times teams can't come to a final decision because they have one or two, and there's a healthy fear that they almost disassemble the hierarchy in that locker room by choosing one over another. And that's where I think that teams delay making that decision.
Right, and I'm talking more as to what happens on the ice. So what I'm talking about, Aaron, is I look at the Canadiens and what went wrong last year, and let's say Shea Weber was the captain instead of Max Pacioretty, right? A thing that some in the fan base want to see. If that was the case last year, my belief is that Shea Weber still gets injured, Carey Price still has a down year, Max Pacioretty still only scores 17 goals. The power play still struggles. Carl Alsner plays the exact same way. You see what I'm getting at? Like, I don't see a change in that letter making a difference as to what happens on the ice during the game.
I will tell you that I think that and this is just my observation, and I'm going to make a statement, if Montreal takes the C away, you need to get rid of that player. If you take the C away from Pacioretty, although he's saying all the right things, I think it's deflating to the ego and to your investment. It's like it's a professional athlete has to have the ultimate belief that they can do everything and anything. And for that signal, once you get to the top and then get put down a rung, I would tell you that's difficult to recover from. And Roddy Brind'Amour went through that. Rutherford made some ingenious decision, and I say that facetiously, to try and bring Eric Staal along mid-season. Even though we were struggling that year where everybody got traded at the end of the season, you don't do that. You don't do that to a hockey player, and unless he's brought about it because he's made dumb decisions off the ice, he's got a DUI, he's got other issues that are affecting that locker room, you got to maintain the continuity. So I do believe that if Pacioretty didn't have correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he mention at some point last year that there's a certain level of pressure that goes with being a captain in Montreal?
Yeah, early on in the year, he spoke to Arpon Basu of The Athletic, and he was quite the comments struck a lot of us as almost a public plea to perhaps relieve some of the pressure. He basically said, I'm among the worst players right now. How can I talk to guys who are struggling?
Right. And so maybe what his point was, it's one thing to demonstrate based on effort and investment in the team that you see in the locker room, but it's tough sometimes for a captain when things aren't going well for him to publicly start talking about it, because he's got to pull the thumb, and oftentimes the questions talk about leveling some criticism at both himself, but more often teammates or even at coaches, right, at the systems or at management for the lack of transactions or reinforcements that are needed to get them out of this rut. So, I mean, that's almost a good quality. The fact that a guy recognizes, it's a difficult circumstance to come out and say, hey, yeah, we all suck. We all do. He's doing this, Ford's doing this, where you feel a responsibility to say, but first and foremost, I'm god-awful right now, too. So at least he's recognizing it. He's not got his head in the clouds.
So other than perhaps PK Subban, and there are a lot of people, especially at the time, who thought that Max Pacioretty was responsible for the PK Subban trade. I hope enough time has gone by that you realize, what really went down, and it was the people who are running this team in the management offices and above that who wanted PK Subban out of town. So not Max Pacioretty.
Correct.
There's a disconnect. The players will tell you publicly. Even Lars Eller came to bat for him, who's not even here, and privately, that they like Pacioretty as a captain. But the Canadians dislike him so much as a captain that they want to move on from him. Well, is it because he's too good of a captain for his teammates, which made him not a good captain for the people who run the team? How does this work?
That's called a dictatorship. For management to come in and, I'll rephrase that. One, it's always easier for a player to come to the defense of another when he's not on that team. He doesn't have to go back in that locker room. He doesn't have to deal with both coaching staff and management. So as much as it's nice that Lars Eller did that, take perspective, it would mean more to me if a guy like Carey Price in this circumstance comes out and fires something out and says, here's my experience, I disagree with, or whatever statement he wants to make. But I wouldn't expect him to do it, nor should he. The idea that an owner, a manager, a coach doesn't like a captain because he's too good for the team, it flies in the face of common sense, right? If he's good for the team and he's in there, like, a captain isn't soft. The tone is set by the coach. So if the thought is he's too much of a player's captain, well, that's what he's supposed to be there for. He's supposed to get an understanding of the landscape of his team. Some guys have off-ice personal issues. Some guys, like in society, have addiction issues. Some guys are flowing along and their focus isn't there because they're young. Some guy, whatever struggles you have or whatever good things are going on for you that he might recognize in your game that you can maintain to keep a level of competition up or keep your game at that heightened level, he's supposed to be there to do. If there's a sense there's a softness in that locker room, that falls on the coaches. That's their locker room. It's supposed to be a liaison, right? He's almost like I wouldn't say the middleman in business, but the ombudsman. Like, he's supposed to be there to communicate between the coach and the players, to keep the players having to talk to the coaches as much as you'd expect them to if coaches had their way. I mean, coaches have you in their office every single day going through video and ad nauseum talking about the improvements in their game. So he's supposed to communicate to the team or the coaches or management, the atmosphere in the locker room, what he sees, what he thinks, but he's supposed to be the buffer. So if they don't like that buffer, well, that's their fault. I mean, that's what the captain's supposed to do.
Finishing up with Aaron Ward on Melnick in the afternoon on TSN 690. Pierre McGuire in about 10 minutes. Bill Beacon in studio between 6 and 7. Joey.
Can I say one thing?
Of course.
The fact that this is what the Montreal Canadiens are dealing with right now, it's just nuts. Like, how many other markets in the National Hockey League are having this conversation? And I know it's a joke. We joked about, guess what topic we're talking about. But the fact that we have to dissect the captain because the poor guy has to answer for, what we all know is the case in Montreal. It's a tough market. So it's not always going to go great. It's not always going to go poorly. So hopefully it flows up. But the idea that some of this is created by management and they want the guy out, I'm like, come on, guys. You have history behind you. You're one of the original 6 organizations. Don't let the dog and pony show enter into this. I don't know. Just don't.
Too late.
Don't let this be Long Island. Just don't let this be Long Island.
So you're saying, Aaron, that if you take away the C, you got to get rid of him, right? So
I do. I believe that.
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, let's say he starts the season here, they take away the C. That's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but let's just say that's what happens. How do you think perception in that room changes, and how would you react if you were in that room?
I would react. I'd feel bad for the guy. And I'm going to be honest, whether he wants to say it or not, that is so deflating to the ego. I'm not talking about the ego of, I'm great.
But it's happened, Aaron. I'm only interjecting here to let you know we have about a minute. But I just want Joe Thornton, Dustin Brown, Patrick Marleau. It has happened to
Good. You should ask them how it felt. Dustin Brown, after he got the captaincy taken away, how did he do? It sucked for him.
Yeah, he didn't play well for the coach.
No,
that's
he
for
didn't.
Sure.
And how long did it take for him to recover?
As soon as the coach was gone.
Last year, he got better.
Yeah, as soon as the coach was gone.
Well, you can blame it on whatever, but you're responsible for your own performance, right? It's hard to park that.
Yeah.
It diminishes your sense of self. You work your ass off all this time to be a leader in the team, and all of a sudden let's have a do-over. That's just factually. No one should feel sorry for hockey players. I'm just saying it's the reality of being a human being, and those things are tough to assimilate to. It's just it's a new order that you have to get accustomed to, and it's tough. And I can't imagine ever having to deal with that.
Appreciate the insight as always. Monday is the golf tournament. You ain't seen nothing yet. Thanks, Aaron. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Thanks.
All right, Aaron Ward.